In this video, we're going to break down the worst thing every South Park character has ever done, ranking their moments from least to most insane. And honestly, narrowing it down was harder than you'd think because this show has been on the air since August 13th, 1997. That's 28 seasons and 338 episodes of absolute moral depravity, disguised as a cartoon about 4 kids in Colorado. Trey Parker and Matt Stone didn't just create characters, they created a rogues gallery of small-town sociopaths, narcissists, cowards, and one kid who might genuinely be the most evil fictional character in television history. But we'll get to him. We're starting from the bottom, the characters who are barely guilty of anything, and working our way up to the absolute worst human being South Park has ever produced. And trust me, by the time we get there, you'll understand why this show has won 5 Emmy Awards and been banned in multiple countries. So settle in, this is going to take a while. And what makes this ranking interesting is that South Park doesn't treat morality the way other shows do. The Simpsons has Homer, who's selfish but lovable. Family Guy has Peter, who's destructive but too stupid to know better. But South Park doesn't give its characters that kind of cover. In South Park, the adults know what they're doing. The children know what they're doing, and almost nobody changes. The show has been running since 1997, making it one of the longest-running animated series in American history. It was the first weekly program to receive a TVMA rating. Its creators, Trey Parker and Matt Stone, produce each episode in roughly 6 days, an unprecedented turnaround that allows them to comment on current events almost in real time. The show has won 5 Primetime Emmy Awards for Outstanding Animated Program and earned a Peabody Award for Distinguished Social Commentary. It was nominated for an Academy Award for the song Blame Canada from the 1999 theatrical film South Park Bigger, Longer, and Uncut. And through all of that acclaim, through all of that cultural significance, at the center of it all is a town full of people doing unconscionable things to each other. So let's meet them. Starting from the least evil and working our way up to the worst human being in fictional history. Let's get started. First up, we have Stotch, the least evil character on this list, and honestly, putting him here almost feels unfair. Stotch is the kid South Park uses to remind you that innocence still exists, right before they destroy it for a laugh. He's been a background character since the very first episode in 1997, but he didn't really become important until around season 3. When the show started giving him actual storylines. By season 6, after Kenny was killed off for nearly the entire season, Butters became the unofficial 5th member of the group, and that's when things started going wrong for him. Not because Butters changed, he never changes. He's the same naive, trusting, desperate to please kid in every single episode. What changed is that the show realized putting Butters in terrible situations was comedy gold. Precisely because he's too innocent to understand what's happening to him. His father, Stephen Stotch, grounds him for basically everything. His mother once tried to drown him in a car. His classmates manipulate him constantly. And Eric Cartman has turned Butters into his personal punching bag across dozens of episodes. So when we talk about the worst things Butters has done, we need to understand the context. Almost everything on this list happened because someone else pushed him into it, tricked him into it, or broke him so badly that he snapped for 5 minutes before going right back to being sweet, gullible Butters. The first episode we need to look at is You Got F'd in the A from Season 8, Episode 4. This is the episode that reveals Butters has a dark secret and it's not what you'd expect. The boys get challenged to a dance battle by a rival crew from another school. They need to assemble a team, and someone remembers that Butters used to be an incredible tap dancer. There's just one problem. Butters refuses to dance. He's terrified of it. When the boys press him on why, Butters tells them what happened the last time he performed. During a recital, one of his tap shoes flew off his foot and struck a spotlight on the ceiling. The spotlight fell and crushed a member of the audience. People died because of Butters' tap dancing. This traumatized him so badly that he swore he'd never dance again. Now here's the thing, this wasn't murder, this wasn't malice. This was a freak accident caused by a kid whose shoe wasn't tied tight enough. But the show takes it further. The boys eventually convince Butters to dance in the competition, and the exact same thing happens again. His shoe flies off, the spotlight falls, and more people die. Butters is devastated. He doesn't celebrate, he doesn't shrug it off. He's genuinely horrified by what happened, even though it was an accident both times. This is important because it establishes something fundamental about Butters. When bad things happen because of him, he feels it. He carries the guilt. Compare that to almost every other character on this list, and you'll see why Butters is at the bottom. He's the only character in South Park who consistently feels remorse for things that aren't even his fault. The second episode is Margarine from Season 9, Episode 9. This is the one where Butters fakes his own death, and it sounds way worse than it actually is. The boys discover that the girls at school have a fortune-telling device. It's a cootie catcher, one of those paper-folding things kids make. But the boys are convinced it's some kind of magical artifact that can predict the future, and they want to steal it. Their plan is elaborate and insane. They need someone to infiltrate the girls' sleepover party disguised as a new girl in town. Obviously, they pick Butters. But first, they need the world to believe Butters is dead so that nobody comes looking for him while he's undercover. They stage his death. Butters stands on the roof of a building while the boys prepare a pig carcass dressed in his clothes. The pig splats on the ground, and everyone in South Park believes Butters Stotch is dead. His parents are destroyed, his father breaks down, his mother is inconsolable. The whole town mourns, and while all this is happening, Butters is at a sleepover wearing a dress and a wig trying to steal a piece of folded paper. Now here's where Butters' guilt comes in. He didn't come up with this plan. Cartman did. Butters went along with it because the boys told him to. And Butters does what the boys tell him to do. That's his character. He trusts people. He wants to be included. He wants his friends to like him. The emotional devastation his parents go through is real and horrible. But Butters didn't intend any of it. He was a tool being used by smarter, more manipulative kids. The episode actually gets darker when Butters comes home. His parents, having buried what they thought was their son, now believe they've somehow resurrected him from the dead. They think Butters is a zombie or a demon. His father tries to bury him alive. His mother is terrified. And Butters, who has no idea why his parents are acting this way, just wants to come home and be loved. This episode is a perfect example of why Butters ranks so low on this list. The worst things that happen around him are caused by other people. He's the victim of other people's schemes, and the collateral damage always seems to land on him or his family. The third piece of evidence is the Professor Chaos arc, which starts in Season 6, Episode 6, and recurs throughout the series. After the boys literally hold auditions to replace Kenny and then kick Butters out of the group, telling him he's too lame to hang out with, Butters finally snaps. He creates a supervillain persona called Professor Chaos, complete with a tinfoil helmet and a cape made from a towel. His sidekick is Dougie, who goes by General Disarray. Professor Chaos vows to bring destruction and mayhem to South Park. He's going to make them all pay, and then nothing happens. Butters tries to flood the world by leaving a garden hose running. He tries to block out the sun with a piece of cardboard. He tries various schemes to wreak havoc, and every single one of them fails spectacularly. In The Simpsons Already Did It, Season 6, Episode 7, General Disarray keeps pointing out that all of Butters' evil plans were already done on The Simpsons. Butters can't even be original in his villainy. He's so bad at being bad that his schemes don't even qualify as mischief, let alone evil. And here's the key to understanding Butters' version of going dark. His motivation for becoming Professor Chaos isn't greed or sadism or revenge in any meaningful sense. It's loneliness. He was rejected by the only friends he had. He was told he wasn't good enough. Professor Chaos is a lonely kid's fantasy about having power in a world where he has none. And even in that fantasy, he can't bring himself to actually hurt anyone. His evil plans are garden hoses and cardboard. Compare this to what Cartman does when he feels slighted. Cartman feeds a kid his own parents in chili. Butters leaves a hose running. That's the difference. There's one more thing worth mentioning about Butters, and it's the Sarcastiball incident from Season 16, Episode 8. Randy Marsh sarcastically suggests replacing football with a gentler sport, and the town takes him seriously, creating Sarcastiball. Butters becomes the star player and develops a special energy drink called Butters' Creamy Goo. The entire town, including professional athletes, starts drinking it and endorsing it. Nobody realizes what it actually is, and neither does Butters. He genuinely doesn't understand what the substance is or why people might find it disturbing. When the truth finally comes out, Butters is just confused. He wasn't trying to trick anyone. He wasn't being malicious. He simply didn't know. This is Butters in a nutshell. He does things that look terrible from the outside, but when you examine his intent, there's nothing there but a kid who doesn't understand the world and keeps getting used by people who do. There's another dimension to Butters that makes his position at the bottom of this list even more secure, and it's what happens to him when he tries to do the right thing. In Butters' very own episode, Season 5, Episode 14, Butters is sent by his mother to follow his father and find out what present Steven is buying for their anniversary. What Butters discovers is that his father isn't buying presents at all. He's visiting bathhouses and engaging in sexual encounters with other men. Butters, being Butters, has no idea what he's witnessing. He just reports back to his mother what he saw, innocently describing the locations his father visited. His mother figures it out immediately. And instead of dealing with the situation like an adult, instead of confronting her husband or seeking counseling, Linda Stotch attempts to murder Butters. She straps him into the family car and drives it into a river, trying to drown her own child to avoid the shame of her husband's secret life. Butters survives, he crawls out of the river, he makes it home. And his parents, terrified that Butters will reveal what happened, spin an elaborate lie about Butters being kidnapped. The town searches for him, the media gets involved, it becomes a national story. And Butters, confused and traumatized, goes along with his parents' story because that's what Butters does. He trusts them, even the parents who just tried to kill him. This episode is arguably the most important Butters episode in the series because it establishes the fundamental tragedy of his character. Butters isn't just naive. He's systematically failed by every authority figure in his life. His father is living a secret life. His mother tried to murder him. His teacher, Mr. Garrison, is a walking disaster. His classmates use him as a pawn. And through all of it, Butters remains kind. He remains trusting. He remains hopeful that people will treat him well, despite overwhelming evidence that they won't. That's not stupidity, that's a kind of resilience that borders on heroism. Butters Stotch has survived more betrayal, abuse, and manipulation than any other character on this show. And he's never once responded with genuine cruelty. In a ranking of the worst things every South Park character has done, Butters barely registers, not because he hasn't been involved in terrible situations, but because he's almost always the victim rather than the perpetrator. So why is Butters the least evil character on this list? Because his crimes are accidents, manipulations by others, and failed attempts at villainy, motivated by loneliness rather than cruelty. He feels guilty about things he didn't even do. He tries to be a supervillain and can't manage to inconvenience anyone. He's the moral baseline of South Park, the character whose innocence makes everyone else's depravity look worse by comparison. In a town full of monsters, Butters Stotch is just a kid who wants someone to be nice to him. And South Park's cruelest joke might be that nobody ever is. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Kenny McCormick. Kenny McCormick is one of the 4 main characters of South Park, and he's been dying since the very first episode. Voiced by co-creator Matt Stone, Kenny is the kid in the orange parka whose face you almost never see and whose voice you can barely understand. He comes from the poorest family in town. His dad, Stuart, is an unemployed alcoholic. His mom, Carol, washes dishes at Olive Garden. They live in a rundown house on the wrong side of the tracks, and Kenny's entire wardrobe is basically one dirty orange coat that he never takes off. But Kenny's defining trait isn't his poverty, it's the fact that he dies, over and over and over again. He has died more than 120 times across the franchise, and every time his friends Stan and Kyle deliver the same line. "Oh my God, they killed Kenny, you bastards." And then the next episode, Kenny's back, and nobody remembers it happened. For the first 5 seasons, this was just a running gag. Kenny dies in creative and gruesome ways, the boys react for 2 seconds, and life goes on. But in season 14, the show actually explained what's happening. In the Coon trilogy, episodes 11 through 13, Kenny reveals that he's immortal. He can't stay dead. Every time he dies, he wakes up alive in his bed the next morning, and nobody remembers his death. His parents were once part of a cult that worshipped Cthulhu, the Lovecraftian elder god. And that cult connection somehow cursed Kenny with an endless cycle of death and rebirth. His mother gives birth to him again each time. His father once said, "God, this must be the 50th time this has happened." His mother corrected him. 52nd. The reason Kenny ranks so low on this list is that his worst behaviors are almost entirely self-destructive, driven by poverty, hormones, or the kind of nihilism you'd expect from a kid who's died over 100 times and nobody cares. He's not malicious, he doesn't scheme, he doesn't hurt people on purpose, he just lives a miserable life, dies horribly, and does it all over again the next day. The first episode we need to examine is Major Boobage from Season 12, Episode 3. This is the one where Kenny discovers he can get high by huffing cat urine, which the show calls cheesing. When Kenny huffs the cat pee, he hallucinates an elaborate fantasy world inspired by the 1981 animated film Heavy Metal. He sees a kingdom ruled by beautiful women, and he fights monsters alongside a warrior woman named Tarna. The animation style actually changes during these sequences, shifting to rotoscope visuals that mimic the original film. It's visually stunning. But underneath the psychedelic imagery, what's actually happening is that a 9-year-old kid is getting high on cat pee because his real life is so miserable that escaping it is worth the risk. Kenny becomes genuinely addicted. He keeps going back to it. He hides cats so he can continue cheesing. The town eventually bans cats, and Kenny has to find them in secret, like a drug addict hiding his stash. By the end of the episode, Kenny gets sober. But then he finds some flowers, sniffs them, gets a contact high, and immediately hallucinates himself back in the heavy metal fantasy world. He's right back where he started. This episode is played for comedy, and the heavy metal parody sequences are genuinely impressive. But strip away the jokes, and what you have is a story about a child turning to substance abuse because his home life is dysfunctional, and his poverty gives him no other outlet. That's not evil, that's tragic. The second episode is The Ring from Season 13, Episode 1. Kenny McCormick wasn't looking for a soulmate, he was looking for a breakthrough. When he heard the rumors about a 5th grader named Tammy Warner and her adventurous reputation, he knew he'd finally found his chance. This was it, his first real, mature encounter. But then, the concert happened. Under the flashing lights, a corporate boy band started preaching the gospel of purity. Suddenly, Tammy wasn't an adventurous girlfriend anymore. She was a devout follower, swearing off even the simplest touch. Kenny was crushed. Not because of a broken heart, mind you, but because his grand plan had just vanished into thin air. It's a brutal look at how corporations market values to teens, featuring a world-famous cartoon mouse who acts less like a mascot and more like a high-pressure mob boss. But Kenny's role in the episode reveals something important about his character. He's hypersexual. This has been a consistent trait since Season 1. His muffled dialogue is almost always something vulgar or sexual. He looks at Playboy magazines, he sniffs paint. He knows more about sex than any of the other boys, and he's always the first one to seek out anything sexual. In the episode Fat Camp, Season 4, Episode 15, Kenny takes on increasingly disgusting dares for money, including performing an act on a talk show host that gets him arrested. Kenny's sexual behavior isn't evil in the way that Cartman's manipulations are evil. It's the behavior of a kid who's grown up in a chaotic household where boundaries don't exist. He's been exposed to things kids shouldn't see, and it's shaped his behavior. It's inappropriate, sure, but it comes from a place of neglect, not malice. There's another episode that shows a different side of Kenny's behavior, and it's Fat Camp from Season 4, Episode 15. In this episode, the boys discover they can make money by daring Kenny to do increasingly disgusting and dangerous things on film. Kenny, desperate for cash because his family has none, accepts every dare. He eats things no human should eat. He puts himself in situations that are genuinely life-threatening. He performs acts that are so revolting the show can barely depict them. And he does all of it for small amounts of money that he needs because his family is broke. The other boys film everything and sell the footage. Kenny is essentially performing in a degradation contest for pocket change while his friends profit. At one point, the dares escalate to the point where Kenny is doing things on a nationally broadcast talk show that get him arrested. The host, who resembles Howard Stern, pushes Kenny further and further because the audience loves watching a poor kid humiliate himself. This episode strips away any pretense that Kenny's reckless behavior is just for fun. It's survival. He takes these dares because $10 means something to a kid whose family can't afford food. He degrades himself because the alternative is having nothing. His friends exploit his poverty for entertainment, and the adults in the room encourage it because it makes good television. Kenny's worst behavior in this episode isn't the dares themselves. It's the fact that he's so beaten down by poverty that he'll do anything for money, and everyone around him takes advantage of that instead of helping him. The show is making a pointed commentary about how society treats the poor, turning their desperation into content while congratulating itself for giving them an opportunity. Kenny isn't evil here. He's exploited, and the people exploiting him are his own friends. The third and most important episode for understanding Kenny is Best Friends Forever from Season 9, Episode 4. This episode won South Park its very first Primetime Emmy Award in 2005 for Outstanding Animated Program, and it tackles a genuinely sensitive topic. Kenny gets the very first PSP, the PlayStation Portable, and he's incredible at it. He beats every level. He's the chosen one. But then, in classic Kenny fashion, he gets hit by an ice cream truck and ends up in a coma, hooked up to life support in a persistent vegetative state. This was a direct parody of the Terry Schiavo case, the real-life legal battle over whether to remove a brain-dead woman's feeding tube that consumed American media in 2005. In the South Park version, Cartman discovers that Kenny's will leaves the PSP to him, but Kenny can only receive the PSP if he's actually dead. So Cartman campaigns to have Kenny's feeding tube removed. Not because he cares about Kenny's dignity or quality of life, he wants the game. Meanwhile, Stan and Kyle fight to keep Kenny alive. The town splits into two camps. Heaven and Hell get involved. It becomes a massive political satire, all centered on a kid in a coma. Now, Kenny himself isn't doing anything wrong in this episode. He's the victim, not the villain. But the episode is crucial because it reveals how disposable Kenny is to the people around him. Cartman will literally campaign for his death over a video game. The town uses his vegetative state as a political football. Nobody actually cares about Kenny the person. And this connects to the larger tragedy of Kenny's character. In the Mysterian episodes in Season 14, Kenny breaks down and admits the truth about his immortality. He dies all the time. He remembers every single death. The pain, the fear, the confusion of waking up in his bed again, and his friends never remember. They never mourn him for more than a few seconds. He's screaming into a void, dying over and over, and nobody acknowledges his suffering. He calls it a curse, and the Mysterian arc deserves special attention because it's the only time Kenny is given genuine agency in the show. As Mysterian, Kenny is a vigilante superhero who protects his little sister Karen from bullies and bad situations. He watches over her. He fights for her. He tells her that no matter what happens, her guardian angel will always be there. The irony is crushing. Kenny can't save himself from his cycle of death, but he uses his cursed immortality to protect the one person in his life who's more vulnerable than he is. When he dies defending Karen, she never knows it was her brother under the mask. She just knows that Mysterian always comes back. This is the most selfless behavior any character on this list demonstrates. Kenny doesn't protect Karen for praise or reward. He does it because she needs someone, and he's the only one who can't permanently die trying. His immortality, which he views as a curse, becomes a gift when used to protect someone he loves. Compare this to Cartman, who would exploit Karen without a second thought. Compare it to Randy, who neglects his own children's needs for every new obsession. Compare it to Gerald, who lets his trolling harm his own son. Kenny, the poorest kid in town, the kid who dies over and over with nobody remembering, is also the most selfless. His worst acts are survival mechanisms. His best acts are genuine heroism that nobody will ever know about. When you consider what Kenny has been through, his worst behaviors start to make a different kind of sense. The cheesing, the sexual obsession, the reckless behavior. This is a kid who knows with absolute certainty that his death doesn't matter to anyone. He's died 52 times and counting, and nobody mourns him. His parents are too drunk and poor to provide stability. His friends forget his deaths the moment they happen. Kenny's worst behaviors aren't evil. They're coping mechanisms for a kid trapped in an existential nightmare that nobody else can see. The reason Kenny ranks just above Butters is that his behaviors are at least intentional. He chooses to huff cat urine. He chooses to pursue sexual experiences at an inappropriate age. He chooses to take dares for money. These aren't accidents like Butters' tap shoe incidents. but the intent behind them isn't cruelty. It's a mix of desperation, hormones, and the kind of nihilism that comes from knowing your life has a permanent reset button that nobody else can see. Compare Kenny to someone like Quagmire from Family Guy, another character defined by sexual compulsion. Quagmire is an adult who makes conscious, predatory choices. Kenny is a kid from a broken home who's been exposed to too much, too young, and responds the way a neglected child would. There's no scheming. There's no manipulation. There's just a kid in an orange parka who keeps dying and keeps coming back and keeps trying to feel something in the brief moments between deaths. Kenny McCormick's worst behavior is self-destructive rather than outwardly harmful. He's a tragic character whose sins are survival mechanisms in a world that treats his existence as disposable. In a show full of characters who actively choose to hurt others, Kenny stands out as someone whose pain is largely directed inward. He's not the worst person in South Park. He might actually be the saddest. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Stan Marsh. Stan Marsh is supposed to be the normal one. He's the everyman of South Park, the kid who usually sees through the nonsense, delivers the moral lesson at the end of the episode, and serves as the audience's surrogate. Voiced by Trey Parker, Stan is the son of Randy and Sharon Marsh, the boyfriend of Wendy Testaberger, and the best friend of Gerald Broflovski. He's been described by the show's creators as the closest thing to a protagonist South Park has, which makes it all the more interesting when Stan does something terrible. Because unlike Cartman, who's evil by nature, or Randy, who's stupid by choice, Stan knows better. He always knows better, and sometimes he does it anyway. The first episode we need to look at is 2 days before the day after tomorrow, from Season 9, Episode 8. This is the one where Stan causes a genuine disaster and then spends the entire episode trying to avoid taking responsibility for it. The episode starts with Stan and Cartman at a lake. Cartman convinces Stan to drive someone's boat. Stan knows this is a bad idea. He says it's a bad idea. But he does it anyway because Cartman is persuasive and Stan is weak in the moments that matter. They crash the boat into a beaver dam, which causes the dam to break, which floods the entire town of Beaverton. People lose their homes, people are in danger, the damage is massive. And what does Stan do? He runs, he hides, he refuses to admit what happened. Meanwhile, the entire town of South Park panics and starts blaming the flood on global warming. Randy, Stan's father, leads the charge, insisting that climate change caused the disaster. The town descends into chaos as everyone argues about who's responsible. Finger-pointing, paranoia, and mob mentality take over. And the entire time, Stan knows the truth. He caused it. He could stop all of this by simply admitting what happened. But he doesn't. He lets fear and guilt paralyze him while innocent people suffer the consequences. By the end of the episode, Stan does eventually confess. But the damage has already been done. Beaverton is flooded. The town has been torn apart by the blame game. And Stan's confession comes not from a place of genuine moral courage, but from the fact that he simply couldn't carry the guilt anymore. He didn't step forward because it was right. He stepped forward because he couldn't stand how it felt to hide. That distinction matters when you're ranking the worst things characters have done. Stan's failure here isn't an act of cruelty, it's an act of moral cowardice. He had every opportunity to do the right thing, and he chose comfort over honesty every single time until it became unbearable. The flood wasn't intentional, but the cover-up absolutely was. The second episode is actually a two-parter. You're Getting Old, Season 15, Episode 7, and Ass Burgers, Season 15, Episode 8. These episodes are unlike anything South Park had done before, and they reveal the darkest version of Stan's character. The story starts on Stan's 10th birthday. Something changes in him. Suddenly, everything he used to enjoy starts looking and sounding like literal excrement. Music sounds like fart noises. Movies look like people defecating on each other. His friends' conversations sound like gibberish. Stan can't enjoy anything anymore. The world has turned to crap, literally, in his perception. At first, this seems like a typical South Park gag. But then, the show gets real. Stan's parents start fighting because Randy has gone through yet another midlife crisis phase. Sharon finally snaps and tells Randy she can't do this anymore. They get divorced. Stan moves away with his mom. His friendship with Kyle dissolves. Cartman replaces him with a new friend. By the end of You're Getting Old, Stan is alone, depressed, and unable to find joy in anything. The episode ends with Fleetwood Mac's Landslide playing over a montage of Stan's life falling apart. No punchline, no joke, just a kid watching everything he cares about disintegrate while he's powerless to stop it. The follow-up episode, Asperger's, initially seems like it might fix things. Stan discovers that drinking alcohol makes the world look normal again. He starts drinking to cope. A secret organization tells him that the cynicism he's experiencing is actually seeing the world as it really is, and that drinking is the only way to function. For a moment, it looks like South Park is going to do something groundbreaking. A serialized story about childhood depression and alcoholism. But then the show resets. Randy and Sharon get back together, Stan and Kyle become friends again, everything returns to normal, and the final shot is Stan, alone, drinking alcohol to make the world tolerable. Nobody notices, nobody helps. Everything looks fine on the surface, but underneath, Stan is self-medicating to cope with the depression that never actually went away. Now Stan isn't hurting anyone else in these episodes, but what he's doing to himself is deeply harmful, and his inability to communicate his pain means the people around him don't know how to help. His cynicism pushes away Kyle, his best friend. His emotional shutdown contributes to his parents' divorce. His discovery that alcohol fixes his perception of the world sets him on a path of self-destruction that the show quietly acknowledges is still happening. Stan's sin here isn't cruelty, it's withdrawal. When the world becomes too painful, Stan doesn't lash out like Cartman or act recklessly like Randy. He shuts down, he disappears emotionally, and that withdrawal causes its own kind of damage to the people who care about him. There's one more Stan episode that deserves attention because it shows a different dimension of his moral failures. In Raisins, Season 7, Episode 14, Wendy Testaberger breaks up with Stan. This sends him into a deep depression. He starts wearing all black. He listens to goth music. He joins the goth kids at school. He stops talking to his friends. He wallows in his misery for the entire episode, refusing every attempt by Kyle, Kenny, and even Cartman to pull him out of it. Now, a breakup at age 9 might seem trivial, but the show takes Stan's pain seriously. His depression is real. His emotional response is valid. What's not valid is how he handles it. Instead of processing his feelings or talking to someone, Stan makes his pain everyone else's problem. He drags the mood down in every scene. He rejects his friends' attempts to help. He gets angry at Kyle for suggesting that life goes on after a breakup. He treats his personal sadness as a tragedy that the entire world should acknowledge and accommodate. And here's where it connects to Stan's larger character flaw. When Stan is in pain, he withdraws. When he withdraws, the people who care about him suffer. His friends lose their fourth member. His parents worry. The goth kids, who are themselves dealing with real emotional issues, have their space invaded by a kid who's performing sadness rather than processing it. Stan's depression in this episode is real, but his response to it is selfish. He'd rather drag everyone into his darkness than do the hard work of climbing out of it. And this pattern, depression leading to withdrawal, leading to harm to the people around him, is exactly what we see in You're Getting Old years later. Stan doesn't grow. He just repeats the same cycle at higher stakes. The third episode is Trapped in the Closet from Season 9, Episode 12. This is one of the most famous and controversial South Park episodes ever made, and it puts Stan at the center of one of the show's boldest satires. Stan takes a personality test at a Scientology center and scores so high that the Church of Scientology declares him to be the reincarnation of L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of their religion. Suddenly, Stan is a religious figure. Scientologists from around the world flock to South Park to worship him. Tom Cruise shows up, and when Stan tells him his acting isn't that great, locks himself in Stan's closet and refuses to come out. The entire episode becomes a vehicle for attacking Scientology's beliefs and practices, with a now famous on-screen disclaimer reading, "This is what Scientologists actually believe," during a sequence explaining Xenu and the space opera mythology of the religion. Now, what did Stan actually do wrong here? He didn't ask to be declared L. Ron Hubbard reincarnated. He didn't start the religious movement. He just took a personality test. But once the chaos started, Stan went along with it. He didn't immediately reject the premise. He let it grow. He let people worship him. He let Tom Cruise cry in his closet. And while the episode's satire is aimed at Scientology, Stan's passivity is what enables the entire situation to spiral out of control. This episode had real-world consequences, by the way. Isaac Hayes, who voiced the beloved character Chef, was a practicing Scientologist. After this episode aired, Hayes publicly stated he could no longer be part of a show that mocked religious beliefs. He departed in early 2006. The show responded by killing off Chef in the season 10 premiere, The Return of Chef. In one of the most brutal character deaths in the series, Stan's personality test took down a real actor's career and a beloved character. That's the power of passivity in the wrong situation. Looking across these 3 episodes, a pattern emerges. Stan Marsh's worst behavior isn't violence or manipulation or cruelty. It's moral cowardice. He knows right from wrong. He sees clearly. He understands consequences better than almost any other character on the show. But when the moment comes to act on that knowledge, Stan freezes. He lets Beaverton flood rather than admit fault. He drinks rather than face his depression. He lets Scientologists worship him rather than shut it down immediately. Compare Stan to Kyle, who will argue with Cartman to his face even when it makes things worse. Compare him to Kenny, who literally dies defending people as Mysterian. Stan sees the truth and then looks away. He's the kid who could save the day if he just spoke up, and he almost never does until it's too late. In a show full of characters who cause harm through action, Stan causes harm through inaction. He's not evil. He's not even selfish in the way Peter Griffin is selfish. Stan is the smart kid in class who watches the bully beat someone up and says nothing because he doesn't want to get involved. And sometimes that silence is its own kind of cruelty. Stan Marsh ranks in the middle lower tier of this list because his failures are failures of courage, not character. He doesn't want to hurt people. He just doesn't want to inconvenience himself to help them. In the world of South Park, where characters routinely commit murder, fraud, and biological warfare, being a coward might seem like a minor sin. But Stan's cowardice is dangerous precisely because he's smart enough to know better. Every other character on this list has an excuse: stupidity, addiction, trauma, mental illness. Stan has none of those. He has clarity, and he wastes it. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Kyle Broflovski. Kyle Broflovski is the moral compass of South Park, which makes his worst moments so much worse than they'd be from anyone else. When Cartman does something terrible, you expect it. When Randy does something stupid, you roll your eyes. But when Kyle, the kid who gives the big speech at the end of the episode about right and wrong, the kid who stands up to Cartman every single time, when Kyle crosses a line, it hits different. Because Kyle isn't supposed to be this person, and the fact that he becomes this person, even temporarily, tells you something uncomfortable about human nature. Kyle is voiced by Matt Stone and has been one of the 4 main characters since the show's premiere on August 13th, 1997. He's Jewish, which the show uses as both a source of cultural identity and a target for Cartman's relentless anti-Semitism. His mother, Sheila, is one of the most overprotective parents in South Park. His father, Gerald, is a lawyer who we'll be talking about later in this video for very different reasons. Kyle is smart, passionate, and genuinely cares about doing the right thing. He's the kid who argues with Cartman when nobody else will. He's the kid who risks friendships to stand on principle. He's the show's conscience, and that's exactly why his worst moments matter. The first episode is Crack Baby Athletic Association from Season 15, Episode 5. This episode is one of Kyle's most damning moments because it shows him abandoning his principles entirely and doing it willingly. The setup is this. Kyle discovers that Cartman is volunteering at the local hospital working with babies who were born addicted to crack. At first, Kyle is suspicious because Cartman doing something charitable is about as believable as a fish riding a bicycle. His suspicions are justified. Cartman isn't volunteering. He's exploiting the crack babies. He's filming them fighting each other over pieces of crack cocaine and broadcasting the footage online for profit. He's created the Crack Baby Athletic Association, complete with branding and merchandise. It's one of the most morally repugnant things Cartman has ever done, and that's a very competitive field. So what does Kyle do? Does he report Cartman? Does he give a speech about exploitation? Does he stand on principle like he always does? No, Kyle joins the operation. He becomes Cartman's business partner. He helps manage the Crack Baby Athletic Association. He rationalizes it. He tells himself that the babies are already addicted, so it's not like they're making things worse. He tells himself they're providing entertainment, not exploitation. He talks himself into believing that what they're doing is acceptable because the victims were already suffering. This is a complete betrayal of everything Kyle stands for, and the show knows it. The episode draws a direct parallel between what Cartman is doing with crack babies and what the NCAA does with college athletes, profiting off their labor while claiming it's for their benefit. Kyle even says the words out loud. We're not doing anything wrong. We're helping these babies by giving them something to compete for. He sounds exactly like every corporate spokesperson who's ever justified exploitation with the language of opportunity. The reason this is Kyle's worst moment isn't the act itself. Cartman has done much worse. It's that Kyle knows it's wrong and does it anyway. He has to actively suppress his own conscience to participate. He has to argue himself out of his own morality. When the kid who gives the "I learned something today" speech at the end of every episode starts using the same logic as the villain to justify evil, something fundamental has broken. The second episode is Tonsil Trouble from Season 12, Episode 1. Now, this episode is primarily about Cartman doing something horrific, which we'll get to later. But Kyle's behavior in the lead-up is worth examining because it reveals his capacity for pettiness. The setup is simple. Cartman goes in for a routine tonsil removal and contracts HIV from a contaminated blood transfusion. He's devastated. He's scared. For once, Cartman is genuinely vulnerable, dealing with a serious and life-threatening disease. And Kyle's reaction is to laugh at him. Not a nervous chuckle, not an awkward response to an uncomfortable situation. Kyle actively finds it hilarious that Cartman has HIV. He has to leave the room because he can't stop laughing. Every time he looks at Cartman, he bursts out again. He mocks Cartman to his face about it. He calls it karma. Now, is this understandable? Absolutely. Cartman has tormented Kyle for years. He's made anti-Semitic jokes, he's manipulated Kyle, he's humiliated him publicly. Kyle has earned the right to feel some satisfaction when bad things happen to Cartman. But there's a difference between feeling satisfaction and actively mocking someone who has a life-threatening illness. Cartman is genuinely terrified, and Kyle turns it into entertainment. This is the dark side of Kyle's righteousness. He's spent so long positioning himself as morally superior to Cartman that when Cartman suffers, Kyle doesn't see a human being in pain. He sees a villain getting what he deserves. And that dehumanization, that willingness to laugh at someone's genuine suffering because they've been terrible in the past, is a kind of cruelty that Kyle doesn't usually engage in. What makes it worse is what happens next. Cartman, furious at Kyle's mockery, breaks into Kyle's house at night and drips his own HIV-infected blood into Kyle's mouth while he sleeps. Kyle wakes up with HIV. Now, obviously, Cartman's response is astronomically worse than Kyle's laughter. Intentionally infecting someone with a deadly disease is one of the most evil things any character on this show has ever done. But the chain of events started with Kyle's decision to mock Cartman's genuine vulnerability instead of showing basic human empathy. Kyle's worst trait isn't cruelty. It's the belief that his moral superiority exempts him from basic decency toward people he's decided are beneath him. The third episode is Smug Alert from Season 10, Episode 2. This is the one that exposes Kyle's hypocrisy at its most visible. When the Broflovskis buy a hybrid car, Kyle's father Gerald becomes insufferably smug about it. He starts lecturing everyone in South Park about the environment. He sniffs his own farts with satisfaction. The family eventually decides that South Park isn't progressive enough for them and moves to San Francisco, which the show portrays as the smuggest city in America. People in San Francisco literally smell their own flatulence and congratulate themselves on how enlightened they are. And Kyle, the kid who supposedly values humility and honesty, fits right in. He doesn't push back against his parents' smugness. He doesn't point out that moving to San Francisco to feel superior to everyone in South Park is the exact kind of behavior he would normally criticize. He goes along with it. He adapts. He becomes one of the smug San Franciscans. Meanwhile, back in South Park, the loss of all the town's hybrid drivers causes a smug cloud to form over San Francisco, threatening to destroy the city. Cartman, of all people, is the one who saves Kyle's family. Not because he cares about Kyle, but because he needs Kyle to torment. Without Kyle, Cartman has no one to direct his anti-Semitism toward, and his life feels empty. The episode's message is clear. Kyle's moral superiority is performative. When given the chance to join a community of people who agree with him, he doesn't become a better person, he becomes smugger. He doesn't use his principles to challenge people. He uses them to feel good about himself. And that's the difference between genuine morality and self-righteousness. There's one more Kyle moment worth examining, and it comes from the Imagination Land trilogy, Season 11, Episodes 10 through 12. This three-part epic, which later won an Emmy Award for Outstanding Animated Program when it was recut as a TV movie, features an elaborate plot where terrorists attack Imagination Land, the place where all fictional characters exist. Good characters like Santa Claus and Luke Skywalker battle evil characters like Freddy Krueger and the Woodland Critters. But the subplot that matters for Kyle involves a bet he made with Cartman. Before the Imagination Land crisis, Cartman bet Kyle that leprechauns were real. If Cartman was right, Kyle would have to perform an extremely degrading act on Cartman. A leprechaun actually appears, meaning Cartman technically won the bet. And for the entire trilogy, while the fate of Imagination itself hangs in the balance, Cartman's primary concern is forcing Kyle to honor the bet. He goes to court. He hires a lawyer, he presents evidence, he argues his case before a judge. The United States Supreme Court eventually gets involved. And Kyle, despite being one of the heroes trying to save Imagination Land from being nuked by the government, spends a significant portion of his energy trying to get out of the bet rather than just handling it. Now Kyle's position is understandable. The bet was humiliating and Cartman is using it as a power play. But Kyle's response reveals something about his character. He'll fight harder to preserve his dignity than he'll fight to save the world. He'll argue legal technicalities while terrorists are destroying imagination. His pride is more important to him than the bigger picture. This is the same Kyle who lectures others about selflessness and doing the right thing. When his own comfort is on the line, those principles become negotiable. It's a small thing compared to the crack babies or the HIV mockery, but it's another data point in the pattern of Kyle's hypocrisy. He's the hero when it's convenient. When it costs him something personally, he becomes a lot more interested in finding loopholes. Looking at Kyle's worst moments together, a picture emerges of a character whose biggest flaw is the gap between who he thinks he is and who he actually is. Kyle believes he's the good guy. He positions himself as the moral center of the group. He gives speeches about right and wrong, but when tested, he joins Cartman's exploitation of crack babies. When presented with an enemy's suffering, he laughs instead of showing compassion. When given a community of like-minded people, he becomes smugger instead of humbler. Kyle is the character who proves that knowing what's right and doing what's right are two completely different things. Compare Kyle to Brian Griffin from our reference. Both characters position themselves as the intellectual and moral superior of their group. Both are exposed as hypocrites when their principles are actually tested. Brian buys copies of Catcher in the Rye to impress girls. Kyle joins the Crack Baby Athletic Association to make money. Both characters have moments where they see the truth about themselves, and both characters go right back to pretending they're better than everyone else. Kyle ranks above Stan on this list because his failures are more deliberate. Stan's weakness is passivity, a failure to act. Kyle's weakness is hypocrisy, actively betraying his own stated values while maintaining the appearance of moral superiority. Stan lets bad things happen, Kyle participates in bad things, and then gives a speech about why nobody else should do them. In the grand ranking of South Park's worst characters, Kyle occupies an uncomfortable middle ground. He's not evil like Cartman, he's not destructive like Randy, he's not broken like Kenny, he's just a hypocrite. And in a show that satirizes every form of human weakness, hypocrisy might be the one the creators find most unforgivable. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Randy Marsh. Randy Marsh might be the most frustrating character in South Park because, unlike Cartman, who's evil by design, Randy has absolutely no excuse. He's a geologist. He has a doctorate. He's a grown man with a wife, 2 kids, and a career that requires actual scientific knowledge. And despite all of that, Randy Marsh consistently makes the worst decisions of any adult in South Park, and the consequences of those decisions are usually catastrophic. Voiced by Trey Parker, Randy started as a relatively minor character in the early seasons. He was just Stan's dad, a background figure who showed up occasionally to provide parental context. But over time, particularly from season 11 onward, Randy became increasingly central to the show. By season 22, when he founded Tegrity Farms and became a marijuana farmer, Randy had essentially become the show's main character. The creators even acknowledged this shift, with season 23 being described as largely Randy-focused. And as Randy became more prominent, his behavior became more extreme. The first episode we need to examine is with apologies to Jesse Jackson from season 11, episode 1. This is the episode where Randy says a racial slur on national television, and it's one of the most cringe-inducing moments in the entire series. The setup is Wheel of Fortune. Randy makes it to the bonus round. The category is People Who Annoy You. The puzzle on the board shows N_GGERS. The correct answer, obviously, is naggers. But Randy, under the pressure of the lights and the audience, blurts out the N-word on live television. The moment is excruciating. Pat Sajak's face freezes. The audience goes silent. Randy's family, watching at home, is mortified. And then the consequences start piling up. Randy becomes a national pariah. He's confronted everywhere he goes. Stan gets dragged into the fallout at school, where racial tensions spike. The school brings in Dr. David Nelson, a sensitivity speaker who also happens to be a little person, to talk to the kids about empathy and tolerance. And Cartman, in a brilliant subplot, can't stop laughing at Dr. Nelson's height, completely missing the point of the sensitivity training. But let's focus on Randy. What makes this episode so damning for his character isn't the slip-up itself. People make mistakes under pressure. What's damning is how Randy handles the aftermath. He doesn't just apologize and move on, he makes it worse. He tries to explain himself, he gets defensive, he attempts to justify why the word came to mind. He makes the entire situation about his own discomfort rather than acknowledging the harm he caused. And when Jesse Jackson appears and Randy apologizes to him personally, Randy treats it as absolution. He thinks saying sorry to one black man fixes everything. He doesn't understand, even after the entire ordeal, why what he did was actually harmful. He treats the N-word incident as an embarrassment rather than a moral failing. That's the core of Randy's character. He experiences consequences, but he never actually learns from them. He just waits for the situation to blow over and then does something equally stupid the next week. The second episode is the Pandemic Special from season 24, which aired on September 30th, 2020. This was South Park's return after a quiet year during the actual COVID-19 pandemic, and it dropped a bombshell. The episode reveals, through a series of flashbacks, that Randy Marsh may have literally started the global COVID-19 pandemic. During a business trip to China to market his Tegrity Farms marijuana, Randy got extremely intoxicated and had sexual relations with both a bat and a pangolin. The show presents this as the origin event for the virus that changed the entire world. When Randy realizes what he may have done, does he come forward? Does he take responsibility? Does he try to help? No, he covers it up. He spends the episode trying to hide the evidence while simultaneously trying to use the pandemic to boost marijuana sales. He literally markets pandemic special weed, trying to profit off a global catastrophe that he may have caused. The episode handles the pandemic with the same blunt satire South Park applies to everything, and Randy is the embodiment of the show's central criticism. The adults in South Park never take responsibility. They cause disasters and then scramble to avoid accountability while the kids deal with the consequences. Randy potentially starting a global pandemic is the logical extreme of this pattern, and the fact that he tries to make money from it is the cherry on top of a character who has never met a crisis he couldn't make worse. The third episode is Medicinal Fried Chicken from season 14, episode 3. This is the one where Randy deliberately gives himself cancer to get marijuana, and it might be the single most reckless thing any character on this show has ever done to their own body. The episode begins when KFC is banned in South Park and a medicinal marijuana dispensary opens in its place. Randy wants to buy marijuana, but he can't get a prescription without a medical condition. So Randy, a man with a doctorate in geology, a man who understands science, makes a deliberate decision to give himself testicular cancer. He does this by running a microwave oven with the door open and pointing the radiation directly at his crotch. It works. Randy develops enormous, grotesquely swollen testicles. He bounces around town on them like a hopping ball. He gets his marijuana prescription. And then, because Randy never does anything halfway, he convinces the other men in South Park to do the same thing. Multiple grown men give themselves testicular cancer because Randy told them it was a good idea. The imagery in this episode is deliberately over the top. Randy's testicles become so large that he uses them as a beanbag chair. He rolls around on them. He bounces down the street. It's absurd visual comedy, but underneath the comedy is a genuinely disturbing premise. A grown man gave himself cancer because he wanted to get high, and then he encouraged other people to do the same thing. That's not stupidity. That's pathological selfishness disguised as stupidity. Randy knows what cancer is. He knows what radiation does. He made a calculated decision that getting high was worth the risk of a deadly disease, and then he spread that decision to others. This is the difference between Randy and Peter Griffin from Family Guy. Peter is genuinely too stupid to understand consequences. Randy understands consequences perfectly and decides they don't apply to him. But Randy's worst behavior goes beyond individual episodes. There's a pattern to his destruction that's worth examining in full because it reveals something about the character that individual incidents don't capture. Take the Tegrity Farms arc, which began in season 22 and dominated multiple seasons afterward. Randy decides, unilaterally and against his entire family's wishes, to uproot the Marshes from their home in South Park and move them to a marijuana farm in the mountains. Sharon doesn't want to go. Stan tells his father directly to his face that he hates the farm and he hates him. Shelley is miserable. The family is unanimous in their opposition to this decision. And Randy doesn't care. He drags them there because he wants to grow weed, and what Randy wants is the only thing that matters. Once on the farm, Randy becomes increasingly unhinged. He treats marijuana farming like a religious calling. He alienates business partners. He makes deals with the Chinese government in the season 23 episode ban in China, which directly led to the real-world banning of South Park in China. In that episode, Randy travels to China to sell Tegrity Farms marijuana, discovers marijuana is illegal there, and ends up compromising his principles to do business with the Chinese government. He witnesses human rights abuses and does nothing because there's money to be made. The episode's satire is aimed at Hollywood companies that self-censor for Chinese markets. But Randy is the vehicle for that critique. He's the American businessman who'll overlook anything if the profit margin is right. And in the Paramount Plus specials, the post-COVID two-parter from 2021, we see the long-term consequences of Randy's behavior. In the future timeline, an older Randy is bitter, alone, and still refusing to take accountability for anything he's done. He blames Stan for their fractured relationship. He claims the Chinese manipulated him. He insists that none of his failures were his fault. He's become a lonely old man on a failing farm, surrounded by the wreckage of every relationship he destroyed through selfishness, and he still can't see that he's the common denominator. The post-COVID specials show Sharon and Randy divorced. They show Shelley dead from complications that are indirectly linked to Randy's choices. They show Stan estranged from his father, and Randy, faced with all of this evidence that his decades of selfish behavior have destroyed his family, still finds a way to blame everyone but himself. That's the true horror of Randy Marsh. It's not any individual act. It's the accumulation. It's a lifetime of choosing himself over his family over and over in ways both catastrophic and mundane, and never once accepting that he's the problem. There's also the Losing Edge episode, Season 9, Episode 5, which deserves a mention because it shows Randy's competitive selfishness in its purest form. The boys join a Little League baseball team and quickly realize they hate playing. They want to lose so their season will end and they can enjoy their summer. But Randy turns every game into his personal fight club. He picks fights with the dads from opposing teams. He escalates from trash talk to physical violence. He trains for these fights like a professional boxer. He works his way up a hierarchy of dad fighters, treating each Little League game as an opportunity to prove he's the toughest father in the stands. The boys are trying to lose peacefully, and their father is turning youth baseball into a combat sport. The climax comes when Randy faces Bat Dad, the ultimate Little League parent brawler. Their fight is choreographed like a Rocky montage. Randy wins. The boys lose the game and get to stop playing baseball. Everyone gets what they want, but only because Randy turned children's recreation into an outlet for his own aggression. He couldn't just let his son play a game, he had to make it about himself. There are dozens of other Randy Marsh moments we could examine. He bought a Blockbuster video store and went insane like Jack Nicholson in The Shining when it inevitably failed. He became the pop singer Lord in season 18, hiding it from his family while releasing hit songs from the women's bathroom at his office. He fought other dads at his son's Little League games, escalating from trash talk to full brawls, beating a man called Bat Dad nearly to death in the stands. He cut off a hired actor's hand to maintain a lie about time-traveling drug addicts. He tried to produce the world's largest bowel movement and was devastated when Bono beat him. He forced his family to move to Tegrity Farms against their will, ignoring Stan's direct statement that he hated the farm and hated his father. He drove drunk with children in the car. He caused mass panic about global warming. He joined and then abandoned PC culture, becoming a PC bro, and then forgetting about it entirely when the next trend came along. Randy Marsh is what happens when a smart person decides to be stupid because it's more fun. He has every tool available to be a responsible adult. He has education, resources, a family that needs him, and a community that trusts him. And he throws all of it away, over and over, for whatever obsession catches his attention that week. His worst trait isn't stupidity, it's selfishness. Every major Randy plot follows the same pattern. Randy discovers something new. Randy becomes obsessed with that thing. Randy's obsession causes harm to his family and community. Randy faces consequences. Randy learns nothing. The cycle repeats. The man potentially started a global pandemic, and his first instinct was to figure out how to sell weed because of it. He gave himself cancer for marijuana and then recruited others to do the same. He said a racial slur on national television and spent more energy defending himself than understanding why it was wrong. Randy Marsh is proof that intelligence without wisdom is worse than stupidity. A stupid person causes harm by accident. A smart person who chooses to act stupid causes harm on purpose and then pretends it was an accident. That's Randy in every episode. He knows better. He doesn't care. And maybe the most telling detail about Randy Marsh is something Sharon says in You're Getting Old. She tells Randy that she's tired of his phases, she's tired of the obsessions, the disasters, the apologies that lead to nothing. She's tired of watching her husband act like a child while she holds the family together. For one brief moment, the show lets Sharon be the voice of every person who's ever loved someone like Randy, someone who's smart enough to know better but too selfish to do better. And then the show resets. Sharon takes Randy back. The cycle starts again. Because that's what South Park does. It shows you the truth, makes you laugh at it, and then reminds you that nothing ever changes, especially not Randy Marsh. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Mr. Garrison. Mr. Garrison is one of the most complicated characters South Park has ever created, and ranking his worst behavior requires understanding that this is a character who has gone through more transformations than anyone else on the show. He started as the boys' third-grade teacher in the very first season, a seemingly mild-mannered educator with a hand puppet named Mr. Hat who was clearly hiding something. Over the course of 28 seasons, Garrison has come out as gay, transitioned to female and became Mrs. Garrison, transitioned back to male, ran for president as the show's analog for Donald Trump, actually won the presidency, nuked foreign countries, and eventually returned to teaching. No other character in the show has had this kind of arc. And through all of it, a consistent thread runs through every version of Garrison. He's a terrible person who should never have been given authority over anyone, let alone children. The first episode we need to look at is The Death Camp of Tolerance from Season 6, Episode 14. This episode is the one that reveals just how far Garrison will go when he wants something and how willing he is to use the system against itself. The setup is this. Garrison has just come out as gay and has been rehired as the boys' teacher. But Garrison doesn't actually want his job back. He wants to be fired. Specifically, he wants to be fired for being gay so he can sue the school for discrimination and get a massive settlement. His plan is to behave so outrageously in front of the children that the school will have no choice but to fire him. But because the school is terrified of appearing intolerant, nobody fires him no matter what he does. So Garrison escalates. He introduces Mr. Slave, his new teaching assistant and romantic partner. In front of the children, Garrison engages in increasingly graphic acts with Mr. Slave during class. He inserts a gerbil into Mr. Slave during a lesson. The children are horrified. They complain to their parents. And the parents, instead of being outraged at Garrison's behavior, are outraged at their own children for being intolerant. The kids get punished. They're sent to a tolerance camp, which the show designs to look exactly like a concentration camp, complete with guards, barbed wire, and forced labor. The characters are forced to participate in tolerance exercises and are punished if they express any discomfort. Meanwhile, Mr. Garrison keeps escalating his inappropriate behavior because he knows the school is too afraid to fire him. This is brilliant satire because it attacks both intolerance and performative activism. The message is that true acceptance doesn't mean ignoring objectively wrong behavior. A teacher acting out intimate scenes in front of young students isn't something anyone should have to tolerate. But the adults are so terrified of being labeled bigoted that they'd rather send their children to a re-education facility than admit Garrison's behavior is out of line. Garrison exploits this, knowing that in the current social climate, people are too afraid of appearing prejudiced to challenge him. This isn't just bad teaching. This is calculated manipulation of social dynamics to commit what amounts to child abuse in plain sight. The second piece of evidence is the Trump presidency arc, which spans from season 19 through season 24. This is the longest sustained storyline in South Park history, and it transforms Garrison from an incompetent teacher into a literally dangerous world leader. It starts in season 19, episode 1, Stunning and Brave, which introduces PC principle and the broader conversation about political correctness. Garrison, increasingly frustrated with what he sees as excessive sensitivity, decides to run for president. The show makes him a stand-in for Donald Trump, complete with inflammatory rhetoric, wall-building promises, and a complete lack of policy knowledge. But here's where it gets interesting. Garrison doesn't actually want to win. As the campaign progresses, Garrison realizes he has no idea how to run a country. He actively tries to sabotage his own campaign. He says increasingly offensive things, hoping voters will abandon him. But nothing works. The more outrageous he becomes, the more popular he gets. He begs people not to vote for him. They vote for him anyway. He wins the presidency. And once in office, Garrison embraces the power completely. He abandons any pretense of governing responsibly. In season 21, he deals with international crises by threatening nuclear war. He nukes Canada. He causes international incidents on a weekly basis. He uses the presidency to settle personal grudges and pursue petty vendettas. The show plays this as satire of the Trump administration, but Garrison's behavior goes beyond political commentary into genuine villainy. Nuking a country is genocide. Threatening nuclear war puts the entire world at risk. Using the power of the presidency to hurt people you don't like is tyranny. And Garrison does all of it with the same casual indifference he showed when putting a gerbil inside Mr. Slave in front of children. He simply doesn't care about consequences because he's never had to face any. The Trump presidency arc deserves more detail because the scale of Garrison's destruction is genuinely staggering when you catalog it. Once in office, Garrison as president doesn't just make bad decisions. He makes decisions that a person with no understanding of governance, diplomacy, or basic human empathy would make. He tweets threats at foreign leaders. He escalates minor diplomatic incidents into international crises. He uses the military as a personal enforcement tool. In one episode, he literally nukes Canada, killing millions of people because he finds Canadians annoying. The show never addresses the death toll directly, treating the nuclear attack the same way it treats all of Garrison's behavior, as something that happens and then everyone moves on. But if you stop and think about it for even a moment, Garrison committed genocide. He killed millions of civilians because they irritated him. That's not incompetence. That's mass murder committed by someone too self-absorbed to understand or care about the consequences. And nobody stops him. The system doesn't stop him. The military follows his orders. Congress doesn't impeach him. The voters don't recall him. Garrison proves, through the satirical lens of South Park, that a sufficiently terrible person in a sufficiently powerful position can do almost anything and face no consequences, as long as the systems designed to check that power have already been broken by partisanship, cowardice, and apathy. The parallel to real-world politics is the entire point, but within the show's fiction, Garrison's body count makes him one of the deadliest characters in South Park history, possibly second only to Cartman's alliance with Cthulhu. The third episode is the one that arguably started Garrison's descent. Mr. Garrison's Fancy New Vagina from Season 9, Episode 1. This is the episode where Garrison undergoes gender reassignment surgery, and it's one of the most controversial episodes in the show's history. The episode doesn't handle the subject with sensitivity. It presents Garrison's decision to transition as impulsive and poorly thought out, motivated not by genuine gender dysphoria, but by a whim. The surgery itself is depicted using actual medical footage, intercut with animation, which was deliberately provocative. But the episode's most problematic element is how it parallels Garrison's transition with two other characters' body modifications. Kyle gets surgery to become tall and black so he can play basketball. Stan's father, Gerald, gets surgery to become a dolphin. The clear implication is that all three modifications are equally absurd, which is a deeply reductive take on transgender identity. Setting aside the episode's broader commentary, what does this tell us about Garrison's character? It tells us that Garrison makes life-altering decisions without genuine reflection. He treats a major surgical procedure like a new haircut. He doesn't research it. He doesn't consult with mental health professionals. He just does it because he wants to, and then deals with the consequences later, which usually means making everyone else deal with the consequences. This pattern defines Garrison's entire arc. He comes out as gay without processing what that means. He transitions without understanding why. He runs for president as a joke and then governs through chaos. He returns to teaching as if nothing happened. Every major decision Garrison makes is impulsive, self-serving, and ultimately harmful to the people around him. What makes Garrison dangerous, and what separates him from a character like Randy, is that Garrison is given positions of authority. He's a teacher responsible for children's education and safety. He becomes the President of the United States. In both roles, he abuses his power catastrophically. Randy is selfish but ultimately powerless. His disasters are personal and local. Garrison's disasters are institutional and global. When Randy gives himself cancer, he hurts himself and a few friends. When Garrison nukes Canada, he kills millions. The scale of Garrison's worst acts puts him firmly in the upper tier of this ranking. He sexually assaulted his partner in front of class, and the system protected him. He became president, admitted he was unqualified, and then governed through nuclear threats and personal vendettas. He makes irreversible life decisions on impulse and forces everyone around him to deal with the fallout. Garrison represents a terrifying real-world archetype, the incompetent person who fails upward. The person who's given responsibility not because they've earned it, but because the system is too broken to prevent it. And once they have that power, they use it for the worst possible purposes, while everyone around them is too afraid or too confused to stop them. And there's one more aspect of Garrison's character that makes him uniquely dangerous, which is his relationship with his students. Before the presidency, before the transgender arc, before any of the larger-scale chaos, Garrison was a teacher. He was responsible for the education and safety of fourth graders, and he was catastrophically bad at it. Garrison's teaching methods include showing R-rated movies during class, making students do his personal errands, using class time to process his own emotional breakdowns, and teaching material that is either wildly inaccurate or deliberately misleading. In one episode, he teaches evolution by punching a monkey. In another, he's so distracted by his own personal life that he ignores the children entirely for weeks. He uses his puppet, Mr. Hat, and later Mr. Twig, as a way to say things he's thinking but knows he shouldn't say out loud, turning his dissociative behavior into a classroom feature rather than addressing it. The children in Garrison's class are consistently undereducated, psychologically scarred, and exposed to adult content they have no business witnessing. And yet Garrison keeps his job. Through sexual misconduct, through incompetence, through a sex change, through abandoning his class to run for president, through all of it, the system keeps welcoming Garrison back. He always returns to teaching. The school always rehires him. This isn't just a critique of Garrison, it's a critique of a system that values appearances over outcomes, that would rather tolerate a terrible teacher than face the discomfort of removing one. Garrison is the system's failure made flesh, and the children who sit in his classroom season after season are the ones who pay for it. Mr. Garrison ranks high on this list because his worst acts have the largest impact. Butters' tap shoe kills a few people. Kenny hurts himself. Stan and Kyle's failures are personal and contained. Randy's disasters affect South Park, but Garrison's actions affect entire nations. He's not the most personally evil character on this list, Cartman is still worse on an individual level. But in terms of pure damage caused, in terms of lives affected and systems destroyed, Mr. Garrison might be the most destructive character South Park has ever produced. And the scariest part is that nobody stopped him, not once. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Leanne Cartman. Leanne Cartman is the most important enabler in South Park, and understanding her is essential to understanding why her son became the monster he is. She's Eric Cartman's mother, a single parent who is voiced by Trey Parker, and has been present since the very first episode. On the surface, Leanne seems sweet. She speaks softly, she cooks for Eric, she calls him Poopykins. She seems like a loving, if somewhat airheaded mom. But underneath that sweetness is a complete and total failure of parenting that has allowed her son to become, without exaggeration, one of the most evil characters in fictional history. The episode that put Leanne on the map is Cartman's Mom is a Dirty Slut, the season 1 finale, which aired alongside its follow-up. Cartman's Mom is Still a Dirty Slut, the second episode of season 2. Together, these episodes drew approximately 6.2 to 6.4 million viewers with an 8.2 Nielsen rating, making them the most watched episodes in South Park history. The plot centers on Eric trying to discover who his father is. Leanne has always been vague about it, and the episode reveals why. Through a series of flashbacks, it becomes clear that Leanne had illicit relations with essentially every adult male in South Park during a single event called the Drunken Barn Dance. The list of potential fathers includes Officer Barbrady, Chef, Jimbo Kern, Mr. Garrison, the mayor, and multiple other townspeople. Leanne's promiscuity isn't just played for laughs, it's established as a defining characteristic. In later episodes and the video games, Leanne is shown to be involved in even more extreme behavior. She appears in fetish videos. She engages in acts that the show depicts but doesn't fully describe. Her sexual history is a running joke, but it also paints a picture of a woman with deep psychological issues who has no stability to offer her child. But Leanne's sexual behavior, while embarrassing and dysfunctional, isn't the worst thing about her. The worst thing about Leanne Cartman is that she cannot say no to Eric. She cannot discipline him. She cannot set boundaries. She cannot be a parent in any meaningful sense of the word. Throughout the series, there are dozens of examples. When Eric demands things, Leanne gives them to him. When Eric throws tantrums, Leanne caves. In the season 15 premiere, Human Centipede, Cartman has a massive public meltdown when Leanne won't buy him an iPad. He screams at her in a store. He makes false accusations against her on national television, on Dr. Phil's show, claiming she abused him. He does everything in his power to humiliate and manipulate his own mother. And Leanne's response is always the same. She sighs, she looks sad, she gives in every single time. This matters because Eric Cartman didn't become evil in a vacuum. He became evil because nobody ever told him no and made it stick. Leanne had years to set boundaries. She had years to discipline her child. She had years to get help, to reach out to other parents, to consult professionals. Instead, she let Eric run the household. She let him eat whatever he wanted, say whatever he wanted, do whatever he wanted. She created an environment where a child learned that manipulation works, that tantrums produce results, and that other people's feelings don't matter because his own feelings always come first. In Cherokee Hair Tampons, Season 4, Episode 7, Kyle needs a kidney transplant or he'll die. Cartman is a match. Leanne could have intervened. She could have insisted her son donate the kidney to save his classmate's life. Instead, she let Eric refuse. She let him demand $10 million for the organ. She watched her son essentially sentence another child to death over money, and she did nothing. Leanne Cartman is the answer to the question every viewer has asked at some point. How did Eric Cartman get like this? He got like this because his mother loved him too much to parent him. She loved giving him what he wanted more than she loved giving him what he needed. She chose peace in the moment over discipline that would have shaped a better person. And the result is a sociopath. And Leanne's enabling goes beyond just giving Cartman what he wants. There are moments throughout the series where other adults try to intervene, try to set boundaries for Eric, and Leanne actively undermines them. When teachers try to discipline Cartman, Leanne shows up at the school to defend him. When other parents complain about Cartman's behavior, Leon makes excuses. She has been told directly and repeatedly by multiple authority figures that her son has serious behavioral problems. She's been told he needs professional help. She's been told that her permissiveness is making things worse. And every time she nods, agrees, and then goes home and gives Cartman whatever he was screaming for. There's a reading of Leanne's character that's more sympathetic. She's a single mother. She has her own psychological issues. She may lack the support system needed to effectively parent a child as difficult as Eric. Parenting is hard, and parenting a child with sociopathic tendencies is exponentially harder. But the show doesn't really engage with that sympathy. Instead, it presents Leanne as a cautionary tale about what happens when a parent prioritizes being liked by their child over being a parent to their child. Eric doesn't respect Leanne. He manipulates her. He screams at her in public. He makes false accusations against her on national television. And she accepts all of it because the alternative, standing firm, setting boundaries, enforcing consequences, would mean enduring her son's anger, and that's something Leanne cannot bring herself to do. Every act of evil Eric Cartman has ever committed was enabled by a mother who chose peace over parenting. Every person he's hurt, every life he's ruined, every law he's broken, there's a direct line from those acts back to a home where the word no was never spoken and stuck to. Leanne Cartman's worst act isn't something she did, it's everything she didn't do, compounded over 28 seasons into the creation of television's greatest monster. Leanne's ranking on this list isn't about what she did, it's about what she didn't do. She didn't parent, she didn't set limits, she didn't stop the monster she was creating. And because of that, every terrible thing Eric Cartman has ever done can be traced back, at least in part, to a mother who was too weak, too damaged, or too afraid to say no. That's not evil in the way Cartman is evil, but it's the foundation on which his evil was built. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Gerald Broflovski. Gerald Broflovski, Kyle's father, is a character who spent 20 seasons being a reasonable, responsible adult. He's a lawyer. He's a husband. He's a father who, while sometimes overreactive, generally wants what's best for his kids. He was the boring parent, the one you didn't think about when listing South Park's most dysfunctional characters. And then season 20 happened, and everything we thought we knew about Gerald Broflovski fell apart. Season 20, which aired in 2016, introduced a season-long serialized storyline about internet trolling. Someone in South Park, operating under the username SkankHunt42, was posting vicious, degrading comments targeting women, minorities, and vulnerable people online. The troll was relentless. Posts were designed to cause maximum emotional damage. They weren't jokes or provocations, they were calculated cruelty aimed at people who couldn't fight back. The town was in chaos trying to figure out who SkankHunt42 was. The boys initially blamed Cartman, which seemed obvious. Cartman is the town's resident sociopath. Of course he'd be an internet troll. But the boys were wrong. SkankHunt42 wasn't Cartman, it was Gerald Broflovski, Kyle's dad, the lawyer, the responsible parent, the normal one. When the reveal happened, it recontextualized everything about Gerald's character. This wasn't a man who accidentally posted something offensive. This was a man who spent hours deliberately crafting posts designed to hurt people. He targeted women with cruel body-shaming comments. He went after minorities. He attacked people who were already vulnerable. And he did it all from the safety of his home computer, sitting in his office, giggling at the pain he caused. The most disturbing aspect of Gerald's trolling isn't the content of the posts, it's how much he enjoyed it. The show depicts Gerald getting genuine pleasure from other people's suffering. He laughs while typing. He refreshes the page to see the reactions. He's giddy when his posts go viral. He's not trolling because he's angry or hurt or has a political agenda. He's trolling because ruining people's days makes him feel powerful. This is a man who, in his professional life, is articulate, educated, and respected. He knows right from wrong. He understands the impact of words. He teaches his son Kyle about empathy and fairness. And then he goes online and deliberately causes the kind of harm he tells his son is wrong. The season 20 arc takes Gerald's trolling to international levels. His actions trigger a chain reaction that leads to a gender war at the school, where boys and girls turn against each other. His trolling gets connected to a larger network of internet trolls. He gets invited to Denmark to participate in a troll conference. At every point where Gerald could stop, where he could realize the harm he's causing and walk away, he doubles down instead. He rationalizes, he minimizes. He tells himself it's just the internet, just jokes, just words on a screen. But the damage is real. Relationships are destroyed. People are hurt. His own son Kyle is caught in the crossfire of the gender war Gerald's trolling helped create. And the worst part, Gerald gets away with it. By the end of season 20, there are no real consequences for what he did. He doesn't go to jail. He doesn't lose his law license. His family doesn't find out the full extent of his behavior. He goes back to being a respected member of the community, and the entire trolling arc is essentially retconned by the next season. Gerald Broflovski gets to be a monster online and a respectable citizen in person, and nobody ever holds him accountable. This makes Gerald one of the most realistic villains South Park has ever created. He's not a cartoon supervillain. He's not a baby genius with a death ray. He's a middle-aged professional who discovered that anonymity gives him permission to be cruel. And he took that permission and ran with it. His trolling is the kind of evil that exists in the real world, perpetrated by real people who hide behind usernames and IP addresses while causing genuine harm to real human beings. Gerald's trolling arc also revealed something about the broader Broflovski family dynamic that's worth exploring. Kyle spent the entire season trying to figure out who was trolling the school. He destroyed Cartman's electronics because he assumed Cartman was Skank Hunt 42. He participated in a gender war that tore the school apart. He made accusations, broke friendships, and caused genuine harm to innocent people. All because he was so certain that the troll must be Cartman. And the whole time, the troll was sitting at the dinner table with him. Gerald was watching his own son tear the school apart, looking for a troll that lived in their house. He watched Kyle destroy property, lose friends, and participate in conflict that Gerald himself caused. And he said nothing. He let his son suffer the consequences of his own actions without intervening. This is arguably worse than the trolling itself. The trolling was cruel, but it was directed at strangers. Watching your own child suffer because of something you did, and choosing to protect yourself instead of helping him, that's a betrayal of the most fundamental parental duty. Gerald wasn't just a bad person online, he was a bad father in his own home, hiding behind his son's pain rather than ending it. Gerald ranks above his son Kyle on this list because Kyle's hypocrisy is at least partly unconscious. Kyle doesn't always realize he's being a hypocrite. Gerald knows exactly what he's doing. He knows it's wrong, he knows people are getting hurt, and he keeps doing it because it feels good. That's not moral failure, that's moral corruption. Gerald Broflovski is the character who proves that South Park's real monsters aren't always the ones who look like monsters. Sometimes they're the lawyers, the fathers, the respected community members who save their worst behavior for when nobody's watching. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we need to talk about Scott Tenerman because understanding Scott is essential to understanding the absolute worst thing in South Park history. Scott Tenerman is a 9th grader who appeared in only one major episode, but it changed the show's DNA forever. Before this, Cartman was just a mean, selfish bully. After his encounter with Scott, he became a calculated mastermind. It starts when Scott tricks Cartman into buying grown-up hair for $10, mocking Cartman's desire to look mature. When Cartman realizes he's been conned and can't get his money back, the war begins. Cartman attempts several elaborate revenge schemes, including a bizarre plot involving a pony, but Scott stays one step ahead, humiliating Cartman at every turn. He invites the whole school to watch Cartman's plans fail. For most of the episode, Scott is winning. He's smarter than Cartman, faster than Cartman, and he's enjoying every moment of Cartman's humiliation. Now, Scott isn't innocent here. He's a bully. He deliberately targeted a younger, dumber kid for a con. He publicly humiliated Cartman multiple times. He turned Cartman's attempts at revenge into entertainment for the school. But here's the thing about Scott Tenerman. His crimes are the crimes of a mean teenager. He stole $10. He embarrassed a younger kid. That's it. These are things that happen in every school in America. They're wrong, but they're proportional. They're teenage cruelty. What Cartman does in response is not proportional. What Cartman does in response is not even in the same universe as proportional. What Cartman does in response is the single most evil act any character has committed in 28 seasons and 338 episodes of South Park. And understanding the full scope of what Cartman did requires understanding that Scott Tenerman's only crime was being mean to the wrong kid. The reason Scott gets his own section before Cartman's is that his fate is the setup for Cartman's grand reveal. Scott Tenerman is the victim that proved to the audience, to the characters, and to South Park itself that Eric Cartman is not just a bully, he is a genuine psychopath. Everything that follows in Cartman's section starts here, with a 9th grader who thought he was dealing with an angry fat kid and discovered too late that he was dealing with something much, much worse. And later, in the episode 201 from season 14, the show revealed something that made the whole thing even darker. Scott Tenerman and Eric Cartman share the same biological father. Jack Tenerman, Scott's dad, was also Cartman's real father, which means what Cartman did, which we're about to describe in full detail, he did to his own family, his own blood. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. And to fully understand what Scott Tenerman's fate means in the context of this show, you need to understand what South Park was before that episode and what it became after. For the first 4 seasons, South Park was a crude, funny, deliberately offensive cartoon about kids who cursed too much. It had alien abductions, volcano episodes, zombie outbreaks, and a talking piece of Christmas poop named Mr. Hanky. It was shock comedy, it pushed buttons, but it never truly crossed into darkness. Cartman was the fat kid who said racist things and got embarrassed. He was a bully, sure, but a cartoon bully. The kind of character you laughed at because his schemes always blew up in his face. Scott Tenerman Must Die, which aired on July 11th, 2001, was the episode where the show grew up. Or more accurately, it was the episode where the show revealed what it had been building toward all along. Every selfish act, every racist rant, every petty manipulation Cartman had ever committed was retroactively recontextualized by this episode. Those weren't the bumbling schemes of a bratty kid. They were the early experiments of a developing psychopath. Scott Tenerman Must Die didn't change Cartman, it revealed him. And the show has never looked back. Every season since has pushed Cartman further into darkness, secure in the knowledge that the audience now understands what they're dealing with. That's why this episode holds a 9.6 on IMDb, the highest rating in the show's 28-season history. It's not just a great episode, it's the turning point of the entire series. Now for the moment you've been waiting for. We're talking about Eric Cartman. Eric Theodore Cartman is without question the worst character in South Park. And I don't mean that lightly. Across 28 seasons and 338 episodes, across a franchise that has satirized war criminals, dictators, cult leaders, and literal Satan, Eric Cartman stands alone as the most morally bankrupt character the show has ever created. He's been called the greatest villain in animation history. He's been compared to real-world dictators. He's committed acts that, if performed by an adult in the real world, would result in multiple life sentences, and he's 9 years old. Well, technically, he's been 9 years old since 2000, when the boys moved from 3rd grade to 4th grade. He's been in 4th grade for over 2 decades now, which means he's had over 2 decades of screen time to commit an almost incomprehensible catalog of evil. Voiced by co-creator Trey Parker, Cartman has been a central character since the show's very first episode on August 13th, 1997. He lives with his mother, Leanne Cartman, in a house on the south side of South Park. He has no father figure, no siblings, and no consistent moral guidance. He's overweight, which the show uses as both a character trait and a source of denial, since Cartman insists he's big-boned and has threatened violence against anyone who calls him fat. He's anti-Semitic, targeting Gerald Broflovski's Jewish identity in nearly every episode. He's racist, sexist, manipulative, and willing to go to absolutely any length to get what he wants. And the terrifying thing about Cartman isn't just what he does, it's how good he is at doing it. Cartman isn't stupid like Peter Griffin. He isn't impulsive like Randy Marsh. He isn't delusional like Stewie Griffin. Cartman is intelligent, strategic, and patient. He can plan months in advance. He can manipulate adults, children, and entire communities. He can read people's weaknesses and exploit them with surgical precision. He has the mind of a criminal mastermind trapped in the body of a 9-year-old, and the show has spent 28 seasons proving that there is no line he won't cross. Let's start with the episode that changed everything. Scott Tenerman Must Die, Season 5, Episode 4. This episode holds a 9.6 out of 10 on IMDb, making it the highest-rated episode in South Park's entire history. And it earned that rating by showing the audience something they weren't prepared for. As we discussed in the Scott Tenerman section, Cartman was conned by a 9th grader named Scott Tenerman. Scott sold Cartman his pubic hair for $10, publicly humiliated him when Cartman tried to get revenge, and made Cartman look like a fool in front of the entire school. For most of the episode, Scott is winning. Every plan Cartman comes up with fails. Every scheme gets exposed. Scott is smarter, and he knows it. So Cartman stops trying to outsmart Scott directly. Instead, Cartman announces a chili cook-off. He invites the whole town. He says he's made a special batch of chili and he wants Scott to try it. Scott shows up, confident that he's already beaten Cartman. He laughs at the fat kid's pathetic chili cook-off. He tastes the chili. He says it's not bad. And then Cartman reveals what's in the chili. Here's what actually happened. Cartman told a local farmer that a pony was going to be trespassing on his property and the farmer should shoot it. Then Cartman lured Scott's parents, Jack and Mrs. Tenerman, onto the farmer's property. The farmer shot and killed both of them, thinking they were trespassers. Cartman then collected their bodies and ground them into chili. The chili that Scott Tenerman just ate was made from the bodies of his own parents. Scott doesn't believe it at first. Cartman points across the cook-off to a table. On that table is a photograph of the Tenerman parents at the farm, moments before they were killed. Next to the photograph are items belonging to them. The realization hits Scott like a freight train. He starts screaming. He starts crying. He falls to his knees, sobbing uncontrollably because he just ate his own mother and father. And then comes the moment that made television history. Cartman walks up to the sobbing, devastated Scott Tenerman, leans in close, and licks the tears off his face. He drinks in Scott's agony like a fine wine. His face shows pure, undiluted satisfaction. This isn't anger. This isn't revenge in the heat of the moment. This is a child who spent weeks planning the murder of 2 adults and the psychological destruction of their son, all because he was embarrassed about $10 worth of pubic hair. He then invited his favorite band, Radiohead, who voiced themselves in the episode, to witness Scott's breakdown. Radiohead sees Scott crying and calls him a crybaby. Scott loses his mind completely. The episode aired on July 11th, 2001, and it permanently changed how the audience understood Eric Cartman. Before this episode, Cartman was a racist, selfish bully. After this episode, he was a diagnosed sociopath. The show's creators have said that this was the moment Cartman went from being just mean to being genuinely evil. And in Season 14, Episode 6, titled 201, the show added a horrifying postscript. It was revealed that Jack Tenerman, Scott's father, was also Cartman's biological father, which means Cartman didn't just kill 2 random adults. He killed his own father. He ground up his own father and fed him to his own half-brother. And when he found this out, Cartman's only reaction was annoyance that he was half ginger, since the Tenermans were redheads. If Scott Tenerman Must Die was the only terrible thing Cartman ever did, it would be enough to put him at the top of this list. But it's not even close to the only thing. The episode that might be the most personal act of cruelty Cartman ever committed is Tonsil Trouble. Season 12, Episode 1. This is the HIV episode, and it might be the clearest example of Cartman's willingness to destroy someone's life over a minor slight. The episode starts with Cartman going in for a routine tonsillectomy. During the procedure, he contracts HIV from a contaminated blood transfusion. When the diagnosis comes back, Cartman is terrified. HIV is a life-threatening disease. He's scared, he tells his friends. And Kyle, his eternal nemesis, can't stop laughing. Kyle finds it hilarious that Cartman, of all people, has contracted HIV. He mocks Cartman openly. He laughs in his face. He treats it as cosmic justice. Now, as we discussed in Kyle's section, this mockery is cruel. But Kyle's cruelty is verbal. It's laughing at someone. It's mean, but it's words. Cartman's response is not words. Cartman breaks into Kyle's house at night. He finds Kyle sleeping. He draws his own blood, which is infected with HIV. He opens Kyle's mouth, and he drips his HIV-positive blood directly into Kyle's mouth. When Kyle wakes up, he has HIV. Cartman infected his classmate with a deadly disease while he slept, as revenge for being laughed at. Think about the planning this required. Cartman had to draw his own blood. He had to transport it to Kyle's house. He had to break in without being detected. He had to administer the blood without waking Kyle up. This wasn't impulsive. This was methodical, premeditated biological warfare against a 9-year-old boy. In the real world, this would be classified as aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Cartman would face felony charges. He would go to prison. Instead, Cartman and Kyle end up working together to find a cure, which they do by visiting Magic Johnson. The cure involves injecting large amounts of money directly into the bloodstream, a satirical jab at how wealth provides access to healthcare. Both boys are cured. Kyle breaks Cartman's Xbox in retaliation. And the show moves on as if what happened was just another Tuesday in South Park. But it wasn't. Cartman deliberately infected someone with HIV. That's attempted murder through biological means, and he did it over being laughed at. The third category of Cartman's worst behavior isn't a single episode. It's a pattern that spans the entire series and demonstrates the full range of his depravity. Each of these incidents, taken individually, would be the worst thing most characters on this list have ever done. For Cartman, they're Tuesday. In Cherokee Hair Tampons, Season 4, Episode 7, Kyle needs a kidney transplant to survive. Cartman is the only compatible donor. Cartman refuses to donate unless he's paid $10 million. He watches his classmate die on a hospital bed and tries to negotiate a higher price for the organ that could save Kyle's life. He's perfectly content watching a child die if the price isn't right. In the Coon trilogy, Season 14, Episodes 11 through 13, Cartman becomes jealous when his friends kick him out of their superhero group, Coon and Friends. His response is to ally himself with Cthulhu, the Lovecraftian elder god who has emerged through a dimensional portal. Cartman, dressed as his superhero alter ego, the Coon, convinces Cthulhu to destroy San Francisco. The entire city is flattened. Millions of people presumably die. He also directs Cthulhu to attack synagogues and destroy a Justin Bieber concert, killing Bieber and all attending fans. All of this happens because his friends wouldn't let him keep the superhero team name. In Le Petit Tourette, Season 11, Episode 8, Cartman discovers Tourette's syndrome. He meets a boy in a toy store who has the condition, a boy who involuntarily blurts out curse words due to a neurological disorder he can't control. Instead of feeling sympathy, Cartman is jealous. He sees Tourette's as a golden ticket. If he pretends to have the condition, he can say whatever he wants to anyone at any time and nobody can punish him. So Cartman fakes Tourette's. He screams anti-Semitic slurs at Kyle's parents. He hurls profanity at strangers in public. He insults everyone he encounters. And because the adults are too afraid of appearing insensitive to a disabled child, nobody stops him. He gets praised for his bravery in living with the condition. He gets sympathy and attention. He gets to say the most vicious things imaginable with zero consequences. The episode does have a satisfying twist. After going so long without a filter, Cartman starts involuntarily blurting out his own embarrassing secrets. His fake Tourette's starts working against him, revealing personal humiliations he'd never share willingly. But the damage is already done. He faked a disability. He exploited a real neurological condition for personal gain. He used the social protection afforded to disabled people as a shield for his own cruelty. In a Season 8 episode called Up the Down Steroid, Cartman takes his exploitation of disability even further. When he learns that the Special Olympics offers a cash prize, Cartman disguises himself as a person with intellectual disabilities so he can compete and win the money. He shaves his head. He acts out a crude, offensive impersonation of someone with a cognitive disability. He enters the competition expecting to easily defeat the actual athletes, and he loses, badly. He comes in last place in every event. He's so out of shape and so unathletic that genuine Special Olympics athletes crush him in every competition. The only award he receives is the Spirit Award, which comes with a gift certificate. This episode works as satire because Cartman's bigotry is his downfall. He assumed that people with disabilities couldn't compete with a normal person, and he was humiliatingly wrong. But the intent behind his scheme is pure evil. He was willing to mock an entire community of disabled athletes, steal resources meant for them, and profit from their event. all for a cash prize. In the Ginger Kids episode, Season 9, Episode 11, Cartman delivers a class presentation arguing that red-haired kids with pale skin and freckles are subhuman. They have no souls, he says. They're diseased. They should be segregated from normal society. Kyle and Stan, disgusted by this, decide to teach Cartman a lesson. While Cartman sleeps, they dye his hair red, bleach his skin, and paint freckles on his face. When Cartman wakes up and sees himself in the mirror, he believes he's become a ginger. And what does he do? Does he learn empathy? Does he realize his words were hurtful now that he's on the receiving end? No, he forms the Ginger Separatist movement. He rallies the Ginger Kids of South Park into an army. He tells them they're superior to non-gingers. He plans to round up all non-ginger children, put them in cages, and exterminate them. He literally organizes a genocide. He decides Kyle will be the first to die because he's a daywalker, a person with red hair but without pale skin and freckles. The episode ends with Kyle whispering the truth to Cartman just before the execution begins. Cartman, learning he's not actually a ginger, immediately calls off the genocide. Not because killing children is wrong, but because he's not one of them anymore. He only cared about ginger rights when he thought he was ginger. The moment he realized he wasn't, other gingers went right back to being subhuman in his eyes. In Casa Bonita, Season 7, Episode 11, Cartman goes to extraordinary lengths over something absurdly small. Kyle is having a birthday party at Casa Bonita, a real Mexican restaurant in Denver that features cliff divers, an arcade, and an indoor cave. Cartman isn't invited because Kyle hates him. But Kyle tells Cartman he can come if Butters can't make it. Cartman's solution is simple. He tells Butters that a meteor is about to hit the Earth and civilization is ending. He locks Butters in an underground bunker. He leaves him there for weeks, periodically returning to tell Butters that everyone he knows is dead, that the surface world has been destroyed, and that they're the last survivors. Butters, trusting and naive as always, believes every word. Butters is overwhelmed with fear, convinced that the world has ended, and he is the sole survivor. He mourns alone in a dark underground shelter while Cartman happily enjoys dinner at a Mexican-themed restaurant. Eventually, the truth is revealed, and Butters is brought back to safety. When Cartman is finally confronted, his only regret is that his meal was interrupted. He led his friend through a psychological ordeal for weeks, keeping him in total isolation, all just to ensure he could attend a birthday party at his favorite resort. When the other kids pointed out that Cartman's behavior reflected worse on himself than on Butters, Cartman panicked and tried to get Butters into a compromising position to take a balancing photograph. The situation spiraled, and Butters' father, upon seeing one of the photos, sent Butters to a camp for confused children. Butters was punished for something that was done to him while he was unconscious by a kid who thought sexually degrading an unconscious person was a prank. In the probably two-parter, Season 4, Episodes 9 and 10, Cartman discovers religion, or rather he discovers that religion can be profitable. Terrified that they'll go to hell, the children of South Park start attending church obsessively. Cartman sees an opportunity. He starts his own church. He studies the Bible, not because he believes in it, but because he needs to know enough to manipulate other children into giving him money. He convinces kids to donate to his church, claiming he'll build a new house of worship. In reality, he pockets every dollar. When Stan and Kyle confront him, Cartman doesn't deny it. He tells them matter-of-factly that he's simply exploiting the fact that people can be forgiven for any sin, so scamming them is a victimless crime since God will forgive him anyway. He's weaponized forgiveness. He's turned grace into a business model. And then there's the Crack Baby Athletic Association from Season 15, Episode 5, which we already discussed in Kyle's section. But it's worth revisiting from Cartman's perspective. Cartman found babies born addicted to crack cocaine. He filmed them fighting over pieces of crack. He broadcast the footage. He planned to license the sport through EA Sports. He built an entire business around the exploitation of addicted newborns. And when Kyle questioned whether this was wrong, Cartman convinced him it was fine. He didn't just commit evil, he recruited the show's moral compass to help him do it. There are still more examples of Cartman's depravity that need to be documented because the sheer volume of his crimes is part of what makes him the worst. In Red Badge of Gayness, Season 3, Episode 14, Cartman cons an entire town into refighting the Civil War because he made a bet with Kyle and Stan about whether the South could win. He gets the South Park adults drunk enough to believe they're actual Confederate soldiers, and then leads them on a campaign across the southern United States, actually conquering several states before being stopped. He started a Civil War reenactment and turned it into an actual civil war all over a bet. In the Best Friends Forever episode we discussed in Kenny's section, Cartman's behavior deserves re-examination from his own perspective. Kenny is in a vegetative state. Kenny's will leaves his PSP to Cartman, but only if Kenny actually dies, so Cartman campaigns to have Kenny's feeding tube removed. He organizes protests, he goes on television. He makes impassioned speeches about letting Kenny go and ending his suffering. And every single word is a lie. Cartman doesn't care about Kenny's suffering. He wants the PSP. He's willing to kill his friend for a video game. And the worst part is, he succeeds. The show frames it within the larger Terry Schiavo satire, where both sides of the feeding tube debate are portrayed as missing the point. But within the story, Cartman genuinely advocates for his friend's death to acquire a portable gaming device. He'd kill for a PSP, he actually would. In A Ladder to Heaven, Season 6, Episode 12, the boys discover that Kenny had a candy shopping spree ticket before he died. They need to find the ticket, but Kenny has been cremated. Cartman, mistaking Kenny's ashes for chocolate milk powder, mixes them into a drink and consumes them. He drinks his dead friend's remains. Later, he fills Kenny's urn with kitty litter to hide what he did. While this was technically an accident, not a deliberate act of evil, Cartman's reaction to learning what he consumed is telling. He's annoyed. He's not horrified that he drank his friend's cremated body. He's annoyed that it's inconvenient. Kenny's ashes end up giving Cartman visions, which the boys use to find the ticket, but the fundamental image remains. Cartman consumed his dead friend, and his primary emotion was irritation. And then there's his treatment of Butters, which is so consistent and so cruel that it deserves its own summary. Cartman has used Butters as a patsy in the Awesome O episode, where he dressed as a robot to spy on Butters and learn his secrets. He locked Butters in a bunker for Casa Bonita. He took degrading photos of Butters while he slept. He manipulated Butters into doing his dirty work in dozens of episodes. He chose Butters specifically because Butters will always trust him, always forgive him, and always come back for more abuse. Cartman's relationship with Butters is the clearest demonstration of his predatory nature. He doesn't target strong people. He targets the weakest, most trusting person available, and he exploits that trust systematically. This brings us to the fundamental question: why is Eric Cartman the worst character in South Park? It's not just the individual acts. Other characters have done terrible things. Garrison nuked countries. Gerald trolled innocent people. Randy potentially started a pandemic. But Cartman is different from every one of them for several reasons. And if you need further proof of the gap between Cartman and everyone else on this list, consider the body count. Butters has accidentally killed a handful of people through tap dancing accidents. Kenny kills nobody, he only dies himself. Stan and Kyle have never directly killed anyone. Randy has indirectly caused harm on a massive scale through the pandemic, but even that is debatable since the show treats it as dark comedy rather than confirmed canon. Garrison nuked Canada, which makes him responsible for millions of deaths, but those deaths happened off-screen and the show never dwells on them. Gerald's trolling destroyed reputations and relationships, but didn't directly kill anyone. Leanne's enabling created a monster, but she herself hasn't committed violence. Cartman has directly caused the deaths of Scott Tenerman's parents. He conspired with Cthulhu to destroy an entire city. He's arranged situations that led to deaths in multiple episodes. He tried to exterminate all non-ginger children in South Park. He campaigned to have Kenny's life support removed for a video game. He committed biological warfare by infecting Kyle with HIV. And in every single one of these instances, Cartman showed zero remorse, zero hesitation, and zero interest in the human cost of his actions. The gap between Cartman and the second worst character on this list isn't a gap, it's a canyon. It's the Grand Canyon. Every other character on this list has done terrible things in moments of weakness, stupidity, selfishness, or desperation. Cartman does terrible things as a lifestyle choice. He wakes up every morning and chooses evil the way other kids choose cereal. And he's been doing it since 1997 with no signs of stopping. First, he knows what he's doing. Cartman isn't stupid. He isn't acting on impulse. He isn't caught up in a momentary lapse of judgment. Every terrible thing he does is planned, calculated, and executed with precision. The Scott Tenerman chili scheme required weeks of planning. The HIV infection required breaking into a house at night. The crack baby operation required business infrastructure. Cartman thinks through his evil the way a CEO thinks through a product launch. He identifies the goal, anticipates obstacles, develops contingencies, and executes flawlessly. Second, he feels no remorse. Every other character on this list, with the possible exception of Gerald during his trolling phase, shows some capacity for guilt. Butters cries when people are hurt. Kenny sacrifices himself to save others. Stan feels paralyzed by his conscience. Kyle knows when he's crossed a line. Even Randy, after causing disasters, occasionally looks ashamed. Cartman never does. After feeding a boy his own parents, Cartman's emotion was satisfaction. After infecting Kyle with HIV, his emotion was annoyance that Kyle was upset. After locking Butters in a bunker for weeks, his emotion was disappointment about missing dessert. There is no internal mechanism in Cartman that registers other people's pain as something he should care about. Third, he escalates. Most characters in South Park have a ceiling. There's a point beyond which they won't go. Butters can't hurt anyone. Kenny hurts himself. Stan won't act. Kyle will stop when confronted. Randy will apologize when caught. Even Garrison's worst acts are products of incompetence rather than malice. Cartman has no ceiling. He murdered his own father and fed him to his half-brother. He committed biological warfare. He allied with an elder god to flatten a city. He organized a genocide. Each act is worse than the last, and there's no indication he's reached his limit. If anything, the show has proven that Cartman's capacity for evil grows with every season. Fourth, he's a child. Every other character who commits acts of serious evil on this list is an adult. Gerald is a grown man, Randy is a father, Garrison is a teacher, and then a president. Their evil can be partially attributed to adult circumstances, midlife crises, power corruption, anonymity of the internet. Cartman has none of those excuses. He's 9. He hasn't been warped by the pressures of adult life. He hasn't been corrupted by institutional power. He's just evil. Innately, fundamentally, joyfully evil. And that's scarier than any adult villain because it suggests that some people are born this way, or at least shaped so early that there's no hope of changing them. And fifth, the show has confirmed repeatedly that Cartman has the capacity for empathy and chooses not to use it. He loves his cat, Mr. Kitty. He has moments of genuine connection with his mother. In some episodes, he shows vulnerability, fear, and even kindness. These moments prove that Cartman isn't a robot. He isn't incapable of feeling. He simply chooses over and over to ignore those feelings in favor of selfishness, cruelty, and control. That's what makes him the worst. A monster who can't feel anything is scary. A monster who can feel everything and chooses evil anyway is terrifying. Eric Cartman has murdered people. He's committed biological warfare. He's organized genocides. He's exploited disabled people, addicted babies, and grieving children. He's faked disabilities, started religions for profit, and allied with cosmic horrors. He's fed a boy his own parents and licked the tears off his face. He's done all of this before his 10th birthday. And in a show that has been running since 1997, that holds 5 Emmy Awards, that has been watched by hundreds of millions of people, no character has ever come close to matching Eric Cartman's capacity for deliberate, calculated, joyful evil. He's not just the worst character in South Park, he might be the worst character in the history of animation. And somewhere in the fictional town of South Park, Colorado, he's sitting in his 4th grade classroom waiting for his next scheme. Because that's the most terrifying thing about Eric Cartman, he's not done yet. There's one more aspect of Cartman's evil that needs to be addressed, and it's perhaps the most disturbing of all. Throughout the series, Cartman has demonstrated an ability to be genuinely kind when it serves his interests or when he forgets to be terrible. In the episode Kenny Dies, Season 5, Episode 13, Cartman appears to be genuinely devastated by Kenny's terminal illness. He cries. He visits Kenny in the hospital. He seems to care. But the reveal at the end of the episode is that Cartman's grief was fake. He was using Kenny's illness as a cover for a scheme involving stem cell research and an elaborate plan to get a Shakey's Pizza franchise. Kenny was dying and Cartman was running a con. Every tear was calculated. Every hospital visit was strategic. His friend's genuine grief was just background noise for his latest scheme. This is what separates Cartman from every other villain in animation. The Joker is evil, but he's also insane. Stewie Griffin builds death rays, but he's also a baby struggling with identity. Even the most iconic villains have something that explains their behavior, some trauma or dysfunction that makes their evil comprehensible. Cartman doesn't have that excuse. He's not insane. He understands reality perfectly. He's not traumatized in a way that explains his behavior. His mother is permissive, but she's not abusive. He's not reacting to a harsh world. He's creating the harshness. Cartman chooses evil the way other people choose breakfast cereal. It's a preference, a lifestyle, an identity he's cultivated since childhood and perfected over 28 seasons. And the show, to its enormous credit, has never tried to redeem him permanently. There have been brief arcs where Cartman appeared to change. In season 20, he dated Heidi Turner and seemed to become a better person. But by season 21, the relationship had become toxic and Cartman had reverted to form, manipulating Heidi the way he manipulates everyone. In season 26 and beyond, there have been flashes of a Christian Cartman arc where he claims to have found religion. But the audience has learned, through 28 seasons of betrayal, to never trust Cartman's apparent reformation. He's cried wolf too many times. He's faked sincerity too convincingly. Every apparent change is just the setup for the next reveal of who he really is. The show's creators, Trey Parker and Matt Stone, have spoken about Cartman in interviews over the years. They've described him as the character who lets them explore the absolute worst of human nature without restraint. He's the outlet for every terrible impulse, every selfish thought, every cruel joke that exists in the human psyche. Cartman doesn't represent a specific type of evil. He represents evil itself, pure and unfiltered, wearing a red jacket and a blue hat, sitting in the back row of a fourth-grade classroom in a small town in Colorado. And after 28 seasons, 5 Emmy Awards, and 338 episodes, he's still the scariest character on television. Not because of what he's done, but because you know with absolute certainty that he'll do something worse next season. And that brings us to the end of our ranking. From Butter Stotch, who couldn't hurt anyone if he tried, to Kenny McCormick, who hurts nobody but himself, to Stan and Kyle, who know better but fail anyway, to Randy Marsh and Mr. Garrison, who cause disasters through selfishness and incompetence, to Leanne and Gerald, who enable and embody hidden evil, to Eric Cartman, who stands alone as the worst of the worst. South Park has been on the air since August 13th, 1997. It's won 5 Primetime Emmy Awards. It's been renewed through at least 2029, thanks to a deal worth over $1 billion signed in 2025. 28 seasons, 338 episodes. And through all of it, one thing has remained constant. The town of South Park, Colorado is full of terrible people doing terrible things. And somehow, we can't stop watching. South Park started as a crude little cartoon made from construction paper cutouts. The original pilot episode took 3 months to produce using actual paper and stop-motion photography. Today, the show is animated entirely by computer using Autodesk Maya, but it still deliberately mimics that handmade, jerky aesthetic that made it unique in the first place. Every episode is produced in approximately 6 days, start to finish, with a team of about 70 people working over 100 hours a week. The finished episode is transmitted via satellite to Comedy Central, sometimes just hours before it airs at 10 o'clock on Wednesday nights. This breakneck production schedule was documented in the 2011 special 6 Days to Air, The Making of South Park, and it's what allows the show to be one of the only programs on television that can satirize events almost in real time. The show premiered on August 13th, 1997, with an episode called Cartman Gets an Anal Probe. It pulled a 1.3 Nielsen rating, which was high for cable at the time. By the 10th episode of that first season, ratings had exploded to a 6.4. At its peak in the late 1990s, South Park held the highest ratings of any basic cable program, and it boosted Comedy Central's subscriber base from approximately 9 million households to 50 million. The theatrical film, South Park Bigger, Longer, and Uncut, was released on June 30th, 1999, earned over $83 million worldwide on a $21 million budget, and entered the Guinness Book of World Records for most swearing in an animated film. And despite running for nearly 3 decades, the show isn't slowing down. In July 2025, Parker and Stone signed a $1.5 billion extension deal with Paramount Global, guaranteeing at least 50 new episodes and securing the show through 2029 or 2030. Season 27 premiered on July 23, 2025, and pulled 5.9 million cross-platform viewers in its first 3 days, a 68% increase over the previous season premiere. The second episode of that season drew 6.2 million viewers, making it the most-watched South Park episode since 2018. The show that started with paper cutouts and alien probes is still pulling millions of viewers almost 30 years later, and the characters we've spent this entire video analyzing are the reason why. They're terrible people, every single one of them. But they're our terrible people, and we wouldn't have it any other way. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.